Hi, everybody. It's Glenda McDonald, the Story Finder, and I'd like to welcome everyone here. We've got quite a few people. I don't know what's happened there. I guess people are coming back in. Okay, what is going on? All of a sudden, Tina, do you see viewers there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, there we go. It's
Yes.
just I think they were in the waiting area. We got 18 people. Anyway, yeah. So I'm going to shortly pass it over to Tina. I'm the producer, and I will be watching the comments section. And so if you have any questions, please start them with the letter Q or the word in capitals, the word question. And I will then present them on the stream during the time when Judii is answering questions. So I'm going to step back now and pass it over to Tina Crossfield. Way to go.
Okay, hello and welcome to the Crossfield Publishing booth at the Ontario Library Super Virtual Conference. My name is Tina Crossfield and I am the publisher at Crossfield Publishing. We are live on our booth and on YouTube, and this session is being recorded in case you would like to revisit it or share it at a later date. Before we get started with our author, Judii Merle, I'm going to pass the mic over to Isabel Armiento, who will read the land acknowledgement for our independent press. Isabel?
Great. Thank you so much, Tina. So many of us are tuning in to this conference from different places, but this land acknowledgement will be for St. Mary's, Ontario, which is where Crossfield is located. So we'd like to acknowledge with gratitude and respect the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaronk, and the Tynion nations. May we honor their teachings.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to, before I pass this presentation over to Judii, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about her. So Judii Merle, for many years, Judii sat at the feet of Algonquin Nokomis Faye Hollywood, which led her to work with the Catarokwe Indigenous Health Council, the Grandmothers Council, as well as the Limestone and Algonquin Lakeshore School Boards. As a leader of women and teacher of youth, she has been sharing Indigenous perspectives and inclusivity for more than 20 years in correctional facilities, places of worship, hospitals, government offices, and schools from primary to university. Since childhood, Judii has been a family historian and amateur genealogist. With an extensive database of family lines, she connects people with their cultural heritage as she continues to reach her own Indigenous, French, and German ancestors. As well, Judii is committed to reclaiming and sharing Indigenous arts such as drumming, beading, leatherwork, and language. It was her love of music which led her to form a drum group, Sisters of the Drum, who through engagement with the community have been promoting unity and healing for 20 years. The group has traveled through Ontario and northern US and has produced 3 CDs of traditional hand drum medicine. Judii lives with her husband Paul in southeastern Ontario. In this, her first novel, she weaves her love of storytelling, genealogy, and Indigenous wisdom to give a glimpse of the past while opening the door to the future. She's also a mother of 3 and grandmother to 8. Okay. And Judii, it's over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Aikwe Manitou Nindigenous Makwa Dudam Shabadabajwan Nindinjaba. Oh, where to start? I live in southeastern Ontario, and the story takes place in northern Ontario. I wanted a setting that was in the snow, and it just so happens that today in Eastern Ontario, it is snowing. So I feel like this story has come alive outside of my my kitchen window here. I didn't start out to write a book. I took a writing class at a local senior center here in hopes that they would help me write songs for our drum group. And I got hooked, I guess, would be the easiest way to say it. They gave us lots of exercises as to how to make your brain think outside the box, which I have a difficult time doing myself. They said at one class, just write a paragraph about the first thing that comes to mind. And so I had written this paragraph about this baby being born in the wilderness of Northern Ontario. And then a couple of classes later, the teacher said, okay, so take that paragraph that you wrote a couple of weeks ago and make it into a novel. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. I can't write a novel. I can barely put four paragraphs together and make it a story. So I've had a lot of help along the way. I've had a couple of authors who have been a great help to me already. And here in Napanee, we have a great writers group, and we bounce ideas off of each other. We challenge each other with different scenarios. And it's they constantly make me think. And so that's a good thing. So they are my support group, as well as my family, of course, always gets the first part of the writing. And, you know, they'll tell me, oh, that doesn't make sense, or I need to know more about that particular aspect. So between them, they have really done a lot of work in making this novel ready for publication. And then I met Tina, and the ball started rolling from there, and here we are. I don't know how I got here, but here I am. So I would like to read you that first paragraph that I wrote in this writing class, and it was just before COVID. And so I thought I'd start there. Northern Ontario Wilderness, 1876. A baby's piercing cry sliced the stillness, echoing off the tall pines on the edge of the meadow. Deep in the heart of the forest, Kokokoho turned her great head toward the sound and blinked her yellow eyes. Who, she asked to no one in particular. Mahingan, the wolf, halted mid-step at the base of the wide oak tree upon which the owl was perched. He lifted his head, scented the mouse that he had been following, and something else, something human in the distance. Noiselessly, he abandoned the mouse and padded northeast toward the sound. The man had paused on the edge of the forest clearing, a small cabin hidden in a covering of ice and snow at his back. He was dressed in deerskins, topped with a cloak of beaver fur. One long dark braid hung over his right shoulder. He was tall and lean. His face appeared chiseled in the same granite as the surrounding hillside, his high cheekbones above a long hooked nose. Although his brown eyes were hooded against the cold, he took no notice of the temperature. In his hand, he held a naked infant. Above him, a million sparkling stars decorated the night sky like seed beads on black velvet. One in particular caught his eye, the dog star called by some tribes, or the morning star of the Ojibwe. It seemed to wink at him from the dark background of eternity. The moon, in its descent toward the new day, cast the man's shadow on a thick layer of snow around his high leather moccasins. For a moment, the man stood motionless, tiny in relation to the vastness of creation. His breath hung thick and white in the air around him, as if his spirit was on fire. He lifted the tiny infant to the sky, presented her to all of creation. He locked his eyes on the morning star high above him, while he chanted the song passed down to him by his father's father's father. Miigwech, Great Spirit. Miigwech, Mother of all things. Pewete, this newborn is Minigawan, a gift from the ancestors. His voice was strong and deep. His words grew wings and soared toward the heavens. When he felt the infant gather breath for another shrill cry, he drew her quickly into his robes for warmth and nuzzled her small head against his chin. Into her tiny ear he whispered, Wabanang. In the tradition of his people, that the child be the first person to hear her name spoken. Then he announced to all of creation, to Grandmother Moon, those ancestors watching from above, the standing people around him, the four-leggeds and the flyers, that a daughter had been born to the Anishinaabe people, and that she had a name, Wabanang. The encroaching wolf paused again. From his vantage point on the smooth rock at the crest of the hill, he could clearly see the man standing in the snow. As the strange melody lingered on the night air, Mahingan lifted his face to the moon and joined in the song. And when he turned again to look into the meadow, the man was gone. So from that first paragraph that I wrote in writing class 3 years ago, I guess it would be, it has morphed into this. This is actually the second chapter of the book, because the book starts with the granddaughter. So the granddaughter that you will see on the cover of the book, this is the granddaughter who is looking for her ancestors. And because I do genealogy, that really interested me. They told me in writing class, you write about something that you know about. And right now I'm doing some research into another book, which I don't know a lot about, and it has been a lot of research involved. But this being my first attempt to do something like this, I wanted to start with something that I was familiar with. And genealogy is one of those things that I started when I was, my dad would say, knee-high to a grasshopper, but fairly young. And I pestered my aunts and uncles about names and dates and places and marriages. And one thing about genealogy is that it can be addicting. And so for the last 60 years, I've been working with names and places and dates and genealogy. And so I thought I would write this book from the perspective of this young woman who's heard stories about her grandmother that she never met. So where is her grandmother? What happened to her? How did she live? What events shaped her life? Those are the things that I wrote about in this book. It's not an autobiography. It's not even a true story. But I have pulled a lot of information from my own background, my own stories that I've learned from elders and friends along the way. And I've woven all of those stories together into this novel. And I called her Wabanang. So Wabanang is actually my granddaughter's name. It's the name that she was given at her naming ceremony, and it does mean morning star. So I borrowed her name for this book, and the book will follow Wabanang's life from this beginning at the trapping wilderness of Northern Ontario, into the village where they spend their summers, into her life, how what's it like growing up in the wilderness, the man that she meets, who will become her husband, and the events that happen to her family along the years. And it will again wrap up in the end of the story with this same young woman who's pictured here. This also happens to be my granddaughter in the picture. And whether or not she has found the answers to the questions that she has been searching for. So that's the premise of the book. And that's who I am. My background is French and Anishinaabe on my mother's side, and German and Irish and English on my dad's side. So again, just like Wabanang, I'm a mixture of all of those cultures.
Thank you, Judii. That was lovely. The reading was wonderful. Thank you so much. We do have some questions for you, and Isabel is going to do the
And
do us the honors of.
I'm just going to add those to the stream in a second. Okay, here we go.
I can get started.
Okay.
All right, great. So thank you so much, Judii. That was so beautiful. The language is just, yeah, breathtaking. So the first question is, how did you integrate the Indigenous languages throughout the English text?
It was not easy for me. I have an Algonquin lexicon that I use a lot. And I didn't learn the language as a child. So I'm an adult trying to learn a new language. And I don't know that my brain is set up for learning languages. I never learned French, never took French in school. I barely speak English, I tell people. But it's helpful to have grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren. A few of them are interested in the language and the culture. And so what I have done is incorporated my learning along with their learning. And I figure if there's a way to teach it to kids, then there's a way to teach it to adults too. So we have some games that we play. We have some word associations that we use. We have songs that we sing that teach us the language. And when I go into the public school and I tell stories, I have puppets, I take my drum, and those are the things that I use for them as well as I try to teach them and myself some of the language as we go along.
That's so awesome and very impressive. Our next question we have here is, what is the significance of the star on the cover?
Well, Morning Star is her name. And so the star is, is a reference to her name. And the grandmother that she's searching for here, they did a great job with the cover of this book. Magdalene worked on this, and she's back and forth with me, and we discuss different aspects of this cover. And so originally her name was going to be Full Moon, but there's so much in the book written about the moon. I thought that people might get confused whether I was talking about her or the actual moon. And so it could have had a big moon on the cover instead, but we decided to go with the star. And this young girl does go to residential school, so you see a bit of the school here in the background. This picture depicts her leaving the school and continuing her search for her grandmother. And so that's how the star got on the cover. That's how she got to be Morning Star.
That kind of ties into our next question. I guess not the next question, but Shernette did also ask whether there's some significance to the character's yellow eyes.
Yellow eyes, as in kokokoho at the beginning. I'm assuming that's because there's no yellow eyes in my cover.
I think so, yeah.
No, our mom's name was Night Owl. And so if you see over my shoulder here, I do a lot of things with owls and owl feathers. And so I wanted to bring her presence into the book fairly early. And the owl, kokoho, will appear occasionally in across now and then through the book. Yellow eyes, just because to me, that represents the owl. You don't see many things with yellow eyes. So I thought, as soon as I say yellow eyes, people are going to know that I'm talking about an owl. And then I give her name, Kokokoho, and then the fact that she says, who?
Yes. All right. So this is the question that I thought we were going to ask next.
Okay.
How did you handle the emotion of writing about residential schools?
I learned to read really young. I read a lot of books. You can't see, but in that corner, I have a whole stack of books that I just collect books and I read them and then pass them on. So I read a lot. What I read about are real people. In our writing group, we have people who write science fiction and some of these other genres that I know nothing about. I write about trees and water and people and things that I can reach out and touch. So the writing of the story about her growing up in the wilderness, her family, the rocks and the trees and the animals seemed to come really naturally for me. When I got to the part where she's stolen from her village and taken to residential school, she doesn't know where she is. Her family doesn't know where she is. That was it was a difficult part for me to write because I grew up in a family that wasn't like that. I grew up with two parents. I grew up surrounded by siblings. And I don't want to diminish in any way people's experiences that they had at residential school. I have sat with elders who've told me their stories, and they're horrendous stories. And I didn't want to have to write that part of the book. I didn't want to write about the things that happened to her at residential school. And Jean Ray Baxter, who worked with me through this book, she kept encouraging me, tell us more, tell us what happened, lay your heart out on a page. And that was, to me, that was the hardest part of writing this book.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that does sound really hard.
It was.
Yeah. Do we have more questions? Okay. So Rick is asking, when talking about Wabanang's surroundings, were you able to insert yourself into her space and experience the smells and feel the warmth or coolness of the breezes?
Definitely. Rick will tell you I'm a wordsmith. I like to throw in lots of words. And then, he makes me edit it, and, we cut out some words that don't have to be there. But it's important, I think, for me as a reader, to be able to visualize the story as I'm reading. I want to be able to smell the smoke. I want to be able to feel the sunshine. And I think that was what made it so difficult to write the part about the residential school, because I wanted to be able to feel what she was feeling. And that was hard to actually put that into words and put it on paper. But there are different parts in the book that are really personal to me. Her search for who she is my own personal story. And some of the events that happened to her, some of the visions that she had, are written from my own experience. So there are times when, even though I wrote the book, I will read a particular paragraph or a page and I get chills. Reading it, even though I know what's going to happen, I get chills because I know where those stories have come from.
Yeah, well, your language is very evocative, so it works for us too.
Yeah, Isabel, there's Shernette had a question about hypnosis. Did we already ask that one?
No.
Okay, let me see what she said. I got to find. Oh, here we go.
Okay, so the question is, hypnosis is a powerful tool. How did you discover that practice?
I've dabbled in a lot of things over the last 65 years. One of them was hypnosis. One of them is past life regression. I put a lot of thought into how she was going to connect with her grandmother in this book. And actually, my sister was reading a book at the time about a woman who had been hypnotized into an earlier version of herself. And we were talking about it at the kitchen table. And so the very first chapter, so this was the first chapter that I wrote about the wilderness. But then I went back and did a prequel, if you will, a chapter about the granddaughter and why she's seeking for information about her grandmother, and how she seeks out this hypnotist and asks him if he can take her back in time. And he laughs at her. He said, that's not what a hypnotist does. We make people act foolish and do silly things, but we don't take people back in time. But she was persistent with him. And she really dared him, I think, into giving it a try. And so that's where the idea of the hypnotist comes into play in the beginning of the book.
That's really interesting. I think we just have one more question. Will your next book have any of the same characters?
Not at present. It does not. What I'm researching now is like 200 years ahead of this time frame. So unless those characters move through the generations to connect with this girl, my plan at the moment is not to connect here, but actually to connect with my own grandmother on this end of the spectrum. And so what I'm writing right now goes back to the fur trade and 1600 years ago, and will follow a number of women through different generations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to both of you. We're going to wrap things up now. I'd first like to say thank you to all of our viewers and for all of the great questions, and many thanks to our producer Glenda McDonald and to Isabel Armiento for her assistance. And we are going to go out with a little drumming. So this is going to be good.
So I belong to a group of 13 or 14 women, and we do get together regularly to drum. And as you heard earlier, we do have CDs. This is a song that I wrote for one of the CDs, and it's really the story of my life. And it goes something like this. I was searching for something I could not find, and I was searching Nope, that song does not want to come. You know, it's a funny thing about songs. They have places where they want to be, and this is not where that one wants to be. So, digging out, do ya, do ya, do ya, digging out, do ya, day, digging out, do ya, do ya, digging out, do ya, day. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey ya. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey ya. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey. Digging out, do ya, digging out, do ya, day. Digging out, do ya, digging out, do ya, day. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey ya. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey ya. Wash out, Shania, hey ya, hey.
Thanks, Judii. That was fantastic. We've still got 22 people watching, and we've got to close off because we've got Rick in the wings. We're going to be moving into his session, our final session of today, very shortly. So thanks very much, everybody. Just loved us ending out on the music, and thanks to all our viewers. We're still at 22 people, and it is time to go. So we're going to say goodbye again. Okay, thanks very much, and I'm going to be ending the broadcast now.